Hi guys and girls, I thought in our daily inspirational series today that we would have a look at how to set healthy boundaries and why it's important, particularly in terms of protecting your emotional, your physical, your spiritual and your mental well-being. And when we talk about setting healthy boundaries, it's really in those relationships with others, those people closest to us. It can be in love relationships, it can be with family, it can be with friendships, it can be with complete strangers, it can be in the workplace. And as humans, we are deeply emotional, and I think we can also be quite sensitive and at times feel vulnerable. And we can also create certain levels or other people can create, depending on how they're behaving towards us and through their actions and their spoken words. They can certainly impact how we feel about ourselves, our emotional well-being, our stress levels. And it's one of these things in terms of setting healthy boundaries that's actually a learned practice. And if you've grown up in sort of family dynamics where your boundaries were crossed quite a lot, which means that you had caregivers or you had siblings that constantly crossed your boundaries, whether it's control, whether it is unhealthy behaviors. Often what happens is it's karmic imprints playing out. So it's how they've been treated as children and as adults by their caregivers, and it can come from both sides of the family, both the dynamics of the mother and the father, or if in same-sex relationships, it doesn't really matter in terms of gender. But a lot of what is happening can be toxic generational karmic imprints playing out. And we all come into relationships with others based on our caregiving modalities and how well we were treated. And often some of these behaviors are unconscious, and the ways in which we show up can be unconscious because they've been layered on top of us as karmic imprints. And how do we become aware of those karmic imprints within others and within ourselves? And if you're a bit of a people pleaser, guarantee that your boundaries were constantly crossed, which means you didn't get your needs met. Or if you put up a healthy boundary, it made no difference to whoever was crossing your boundaries. Because people can, and certainly in caregiving relationships, there can be a lot of control applied because those people had control applied to them, or they feel insecure in certain situations, or there can be little power struggles going on. It can also be a demonstration of a lack of consciousness about somebody else's, right to be who they are, because we're all different and we're not all meant to be the same. And there can be this societal and family pressure in all sorts of relationships where people are trying to get you to fit in, to be accepted. And we're all unique and we're all on unique paths. So how do you find your voice, and how do you stand up for yourself, and how do you do it in a way that's empowered versus being something where you're very reactionary? And and that can happen because if you have family dynamics, and we certainly did in our family. We have some very loving dynamics, and we also had some dynamics that there was a lot of control applied and there was a lot of boundaries being crossed, and it went right into adulthood. And I don't want to really go into the specifics of it, but it took a lot of time to learn how to unravel those and how to stand in even my own strength to put healthy boundaries in place. And it's something that when you have someone, and I'm going to talk particularly in terms of caregivers, is because this is often where we learn our boundaries, our healthy boundaries. And if there's drama applied when you put a healthy boundary in place, and the fallout of trying to put a healthy boundary in place creates an enormous amount of stress and conflict, then it can be really hard to learn how to do it, and to do it in a way that you're standing up for yourself. So how do we do it? Well, firstly, we've got to recognize in situations, we've got to really recognize within ourselves and trust ourselves on our intuition, what doesn't feel right for us, where our own personal values are being crossed, and you've got to recognize also when you're crossing your own boundaries and going against your own values, whether it's to people please or be accepted. Yeah, it can be in accepting behaviors of others that are unhealthy for you because you're trying to fit in, or you're trying to get your needs met, you know, or you're feeling emotionally vulnerable, or a bit emotionally needy, because you can accept a whole lot of unhealthy behaviors and not say anything, or try and put a behavior, you know, a boundary in place and then give up. Yeah. So you've got to recognize, what is my responsibility? What do I need to own about myself where I'm crossing my own boundaries? You know, and if you're displaying behaviors towards others where you're being controlling, or you're expecting people to do what you want them to do versus allowing them to be an individual or to have a voice, you've really got to look and see and be consciously aware of, well, how are you showing up in relationships? Where are you trying to apply control to other people? Where are you not allowing people to do what they want, whether it's their own interests, whether it's to express their own, you know, their own opinions? Where are you crossing people's boundaries? It's a very important lesson, and it's one that's worth delving into, because when you learn how to do it, the benefits of it is you get less affected by toxic people. You learn how to stand up for yourself. You learn how to get your needs met, or you walk away and you find better relationships where your needs will get met, that are healthy and balanced. And you learn how to protect your emotional well-being. It can be your physical well-being, your mental well-being. You know, if you have someone, when you try and express yourself or how you're feeling it, because we all have a right to express ourselves about what makes us happy or unhappy, particularly in relationships where we feel perhaps we're being disrespected, we're being judged, we're not being treated right, is we all have that right to speak up for ourselves and do it in a healthy way. Yeah. And if you're being told that you're making stuff up, that you're making issues out of things, that your opinion's not valued, you know, you're making a fuss about nothing, then somebody's actually totally disregarding your feelings and the value of your feelings. They're also stonewalling, so trying to not address an issue by trying to deflect versus having a great conversation, you know, a normal human balanced conversation about it. And sometimes you have to have those conversations and wait for the right moment when things are diffused and calm. Yeah. And, you know, you also teach people how to treat you by your responses to things. And I'm going to say not reactions, because when we react, we're not in control of ourselves. And sometimes we do react because we're feeling emotionally overwhelmed. Don't beat yourself up about it. And you need to remove yourself from a situation because you can't cope with it, or it's too stressful, or you're not being treated right. And when we do that, we teach people where our boundaries are and what is healthy for us. And they can do the same towards us. And if someone's putting healthy boundaries in place with you, then you also need to listen and look at your behaviors and go, oh, where am I not showing up so great? You know, it's a two-way street. And you've also got to look at other people, instead of being really judgmental when they're acting out or they're not treating you right, is you've got to remember that underneath all of that, they may not consciously be aware, and some people are very manipulative, but they've learned to be manipulative, right? Because they've had caregivers that have manipulated each other and they've observed it. And that is their normal, and those dynamics, you know, you should never have been put in a situation, if that is you, or you know someone that's like that. You know, you've got to have some empathy and think that that child was never protected, right? That child should never have been treated like that. And you've got to kind of get to that place, and you've kind of got to realize that, one, you've got to be very conscious of who you're choosing, particularly in love relationships. And, you know, we can all have certain relationship patterns and relationship attachment types as to who we attract to us and who we feel comfortable with it. And sometimes that's not healthy. And when you do that personal development and you learn more about yourself and you do a whole lot of healing, and you come to a place where you're feeling a lot stronger and empowered, and you could recognize patterns playing out and you can recognize triggers playing out, is that you find this beautiful conscious awareness and you are able to make more healthy choices. But you've also, if I come back to this place, if somebody is acting out and they're doing toxic behaviors, then you've got to realize that underneath all that, that's how they were treated. That's what they witnessed. That's what they grew up with. It can be a protective mechanism. Most often, there's somebody that's incredibly vulnerable underneath all of that and have a fear of abandonment, right? They may constantly push people away, do all sorts of behaviors, yeah? It can be more subtle than that. And, you know, people can hide things or be deceptive. And in those instances, You've really got to trust your intuition and what your gut's telling you, and do not ignore it. Yeah. So I really wanted to touch on that. And we can come to a place, and particularly like if you don't feel comfortable in social situations, or you've been through some bad relationships that haven't worked out for you, and you're feeling a little bit battle weary and your heart's been affected, is to recognize that it's a learning process and it's a growth process, and we have to take that time for ourselves to heal the heart chakra, to release, forgive situations, learn from them. And sometimes it can be an incredibly difficult journey, my loves, but it's so worth the effort, because you can then, the more that you release, heal, forgive, continue to try and make better choices for yourself. We can also have siblings that cross our boundaries, that don't treat us right. We can have friends that don't treat us right. I was having a conversation with my girlfriend yesterday. We were out at lunch and we were discussing somebody in our friendship circle, and not in a highly judgmental way, but just in a way that goes, sometimes I'm really shocked by their behavior and how they treat people and how they treat me and you and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And what we didn't feel great about that connection. Both of us have removed that person from our friendship circle. And sometimes you do have to take a step back. It can be very difficult when it's siblings, or if it's children, and sometimes with children, and I'm talking about adult children that are drug affected, and you've tried your best to try and sort that out, or they're stealing from you and they're abusive and they're physically abusive. What can you do in those situations? And I think as parents, that's a really difficult one. I've not been in that situation. I've had friends that have been in that situation, which, often it can be like nephews and people that are related to them. And I think that's incredibly difficult. Yeah, because you still really love, a child you love dearly, right? So how do you set healthy boundaries in place? But, your children have a right to set healthy boundaries with you, particularly if you're overstepping their boundaries. And as a parent, you have a right to put healthy boundaries in place with your children. Doesn't matter how old they are. Yeah. Ideally, you get to a point where you're in the most beautiful, loving relationships, but you have to foster that. Yeah. And if you have a child, particularly an adult child or a teenager growing up, and they're telling you that you're crossing their boundaries, then perhaps you need to listen, because somewhere in there will be some control going on your aspect. And it's probably something you've learned to do, or you've gotten into a pattern or a habit. If it's your spouse telling you that you're applying too much control, because control is a very ugly thing, right? Comes from vulnerability or needing to control a lot of things, not feeling confident, not trusting other people, not allowing them to be their own individual self. So be mindful of that. So what I'm trying to say to you is that there is a huge benefit in learning how to set healthy boundaries for yourself, respecting other people's boundaries. Listening to other people's points of view, as well as putting your own across, and feeling comfortable in being able to speak up for yourself. And you will get a place, it's something you have to learn how to do. And the first time you do it, you'll feel this incredible amount of stress and anxiety, because you're like, we have this inbuilt thing of, if you've dealt with people where you put healthy boundaries in place and you have a massive reaction when you do, there was going to be that fear that you're going to start just kick off a little volcano or a conflict. It doesn't matter. You're still going to get the conflict, right? You're still going to get the reaction, but you've got to stay firm. And then if somebody has been doing that for a long time, it's going to take them quite a while to get used to the fact that you're standing up for yourself and you're not going to accept any sort of behavior anymore, or your boundaries being crossed in that way. Whatever it is for you, it'll be different, for each of us. And you've just got to keep reinforcing those boundaries. And you may get to a point where, if you're in a connection with someone, and it doesn't matter if it's a parent, sibling, friend, lover, hopefully in the instances of a child it can be, but you ideally, your children are pretty precious, is that you've got to decide then what is healthy and not healthy for you. Do you need to distance yourself from that person? Do you need to cut them out of your life completely? Do you need to take a break? Because that's when you teach people that it's not okay. Yeah. It can be one of those experiences where it does create loss and grieving, but then you're also on an emotional level, physical level, because you've got a massive amount of stress going through your body, mental level, is that you're releasing burdens and you're releasing the stress of that, and you're allowing yourself to do things that are healthy for you. Love to hear your feedback, your comments down below on how you feel about this, and where do you need to strengthen your boundaries. Sometimes you have to be mindful that when you get used to putting healthy boundaries in place, there's this kind of like this evolving journey that goes on, because firstly, it's having the courage to put healthy boundaries in place, particularly if certain behaviors have been going on for a long time. It's then, and the courage to speak up for yourself. Then it's that process of getting used to putting healthy boundaries in place, and you will get really good at it. And then your boundaries will be so strong, right, that they're too strong. So then you've got to sort of because what happens then is you might completely protect your heart space. You won't let people into your life. You might be on hyper alert as to red flags and all sorts of things, versus being more open and trusting. Because and then it's when you get to that pivotal moment, it's like, okay, so where can I loosen up my boundaries? Where do I feel? Because you should be able to get to a place where you're so strong and so empowered that no matter what situation you walk into, no matter how somebody, even if it's a complete stranger, speaks to you in a disrespectful way, is that you can, in a way where you are not emotional, sometimes you might feel it underneath, where you're not emotional, and you can verbalize yourself so well that you could kind of go, well, I'm sorry you're feeling that way. This is my reasoning in a very grounded and practical, balanced way, and I wish you well. I wish you well with that. But you're not going to take on board how they react to it, particularly not how you set a healthy boundary. You protect yourself, but you're also firm in what's important to you, your values, and where they finish and you begin, right? And it can be a beautiful thing when you get to that place, because you can go, I can handle anything. And sometimes, you'll still have those moments where you're a bit anxious about putting a boundary in place with someone, particularly if it's an important relationship to you. That's so worthwhile, my loves. It's so worthwhile, and you'll get really good at it. All right. Love to hear your feedback, your comments down below. Now, I do put my inspirational videos out quite regularly. If you want to get them, if you're listening to this on YouTube, you can also get them on Spotify, my Spotify podcast. If you want to listen to them when you're traveling, you can get them on video and audio over there. You can get all of my inspirational videos for free. If you want to get my tarot readings, I do monthly, mid-monthly, are the free versions on my channel. If you want to get my membership content, which is a whole lot more guidance from me, 4 bonus readings every month on your love life, on your career, your life purpose, as well as 2 more energy readings to guide you. Make sure to just check those out. On YouTube, all you have to do is hit the join button. On Spotify, you just have to subscribe to my channel. All right, my loves, take it easy. For now, much love, much light. Namaste.